for most of the people that we start to partner with on the venture side, it is that feels awesome. We're running our own business, but I'm trapped by it. And that big chasm of moving from self-employment to business ownership, that's a huge chasm.
The CEO of Aleph, Mr. Chet Funk. Chet, welcome to Aleph Ventures TV, brother.
Haakon, pleasure to be on your highly rated show, I hear.
Hey, you know, ratings. A lot of people do it for the ratings, not me, man. I do it for the love of the craft.
I love it. I love that about you, man. You're always authentic.
Dude,
Dude,
awesome, man.
Talk about today.
Well, we'll see. I think you are, as I said, the CEO sitting at a visionary seat at Aleph, and I think, you know, today Aleph is, you know, thankfully a pretty decent sized organization. It wasn't always the case, so you've definitely lived through some of the transition. We'll get into that and just kind of what it means to be a visionary, etc. But maybe before we do that, won't you just give a little introduction? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, man. Well, pleasure to be on the show with you for sure. I was born in Iowa, little farm boy. Didn't last more than a couple of years before my dad threw in the towel on the farm, and eventually moved to Wisconsin, lived right on the border. So I'm kind of always Midwest. Grew up in a kind of the normal suburban life, and eventually came up to the University of Minnesota, started in the architecture program, and was a track runner when I was in high school as well. Considered doing that at the University of Minnesota. Threw up every single time I ran, and was looking for a way to pay for college and not continue to throw up, and heard about College Pro. So long story short, got into the industry when I was in college, painted houses and stuff, and worked for a home builder when I was in high school. But got into the industry through College Pro Painters back in the day. And fun fact, my very first hire in the fall of 2005 was Jason Ferris. So first interview, first hire. And both of us kind of began that student painting journey. And both of us said, hey, thank God we're going to business school. I eventually transferred out of architecture and went into the business school here at the University of Minnesota. Said, thank God we're going to business school. I can't wait to be done with this industry. This is hard and bad. And So long story short, met my wife my very last semester. She did not go to the University of Minnesota. Just met her through friend group, same church. Happily married for 12 years. We have kiddo number 4 on the way right now. And man. So we still live in the Twin Cities. We've kind of bounced around. After college, got involved in more real estate and got out of the painting industry for quite some time. And in the side, my wife and I were also doing kind of the bigger pockets, house hacking every 2 to 3 years, swapping it out, leveraging those homestead credits. And but eventually I've settled down in Arden Hills. And Paris painting, my journey into that was in 2016. Jason and I had been friends since college, so kind of a long-standing one. And I was running a more commercial shared office environment, so was helping with that. I'd started a shared office environment with a group of gentlemen that were probably more in their tail end of their careers. I was the young one for sure in that group, and knew that, hey, this is super fun in my 20s, but in my 30s, I got to start making money and figure out what that means in life too. And had a ton of awesome experience back then. Met a lot of great people in the Twin Cities and beyond, and ones that I cherish as mentors as well today. But finally pulled the Band-Aid, I suppose, and took the plunge and joined in, made a deal with Jason back in end of 2016, but it wasn't until Q2 of 2017 that I jumped back into the painting world. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that story, but that's me in a nutshell, man. Not sure if I missed anything else. You and I happen to be part of the same family.
This is a secret. This is a secret. the secret to my success here at Aleph is nepotism.
Sometimes it's not.
Chet's wife and my wife are first cousins, and that's how we bumped into each other initially. That's great, man. I'm curious for you, obviously, and this is something I didn't. I came into the painting industry through Paris Painting. I didn't have any kind of background before that, and the college pro. I was just talking to somebody else on our team who had a college pro background, and man, there's just so many businesses and things going on that came out of that. I'm curious for you, what do you feel like were some of the most impactful things that your time in school, in college pro particularly, like how did that shape you, mold you? How did that help you just as a business person that you still feel like you carry today?
Man, that's a great question. That would be between college pro and school as well. I mean, you ask both those. I often tell people, man, my college pro experience and reading 3 books was just as valuable, if not way more valuable than my career education, or not my college education. I think what college pro, and I was in the entrepreneurial program too at the University of Minnesota. It's come a long way since I've been there, but that's not really something that school teaches, right? The grit, the grind, the risk. Most college education programs are really geared towards making great corporate employees for Fortune 500s. And I can't say I'm an expert in the secondary education system, the higher education system, but at least here at the University of Minnesota, most of those rooms are sponsored by our major Fortune 500s, and this is like their pipeline. So this is how we want you to think, behave, and operate in our ecosystem. And it's not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just very different than being an entrepreneur. So it's pretty rare that somebody gives that much freedom to an 18-year-old kid to say, hey, you're gonna for sure screw it up, but go hire a bunch of people and promise a bunch of people that you're gonna paint their houses, and a lot of you will not maybe make money, but you will certainly make good memories and experiences. And there's a whole spectrum of people that go through college pro and their backgrounds and their experiences in it. But I don't know that I could force a different type of experience that would open your mind and your eyes to the possibilities of what is possible with the right focus, energy, and effort. It takes a lot of the theory out of it, and you push yourself through. We often reference the transition curve. You push yourself all the way through that crisis of engagement, informed pessimism, to that crisis of meaning. And I think that was probably one of the biggest gifts that college pro gave me is the transition curve of realizing in life how many times you're going to feel informed pessimism and crisis of meaning, but that doesn't mean you need to quit. And it doesn't mean that wasn't a good idea. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. There is the ability to push all the way through the curve, work on your skill, surround yourself with like-minded people. And man, that was a big gift for sure. And I didn't get that in any classroom setting for sure.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. What else on that you mentioned in there? Some of that experience, like opening your mind. I think what we've done, and I don't say this boastfully. I think what we've done in our success has been pretty unique in the industry, and we're all grateful for that. And I think a lot of times whenever we interact with folks, leading the development efforts, I talk to a lot of business owners, and so many times it's like they didn't know what was possible. I hear this a lot of, they run their business one way for 10, 15 years, and then they get exposed to a few things and they didn't realize, they didn't know what was possible, and their minds open, and then their business just totally changes. I'm curious for you, maybe back to the early days, what are some of the things that you feel like you were exposed to, whether it was, you mentioned some books, maybe those, some people, some examples that you felt really opened your mind of like what's possible in business ownership?
Yeah. Well, I would just say the 3 that we still reference, and there's a lot of good ones outside of these, but the EMyth was one of the first books back in college that was given to me by a really successful architect, contractor, great business owner in town here. But when I was back in the day doing College Pro, he handed me one of those copies of the books and just said, man, you are still like stuck in technician and management mindset. And this is what the point of the game, right? The entrepreneurial myth. Not everybody wants to play that game. But that was a great book. It was a great foundation of, I would just say many people reference it, right? Not working in the business, but working on the business. And that kind of rolls into that shareholder mentality and mindset. I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad obviously is an old classic for that. Of if I were to synthesize that, that is a great, shock to the system, or a great injection of what does it mean to be a shareholder versus an employee, and those different transitions. And we use his framework. We use the Rich Dad, Poor Dad framework a lot. Of there's kind of no secrets here at Aleph. The goal is to have like no employees, in the sense that even if you are getting a W-2 check at Aleph, how to grow your income, your wealth through skill, and you're not here to plug in and just check in. We want to show people development pathways where it doesn't matter if you're 1099 or W-2. You can be your own self-employed here, right? You can control your own destiny, and that's a big deal getting there. But for most of the people that we start to partner with on the venture side, it is that feels awesome. We're running our own business, but I'm trapped by it. And that big chasm of moving from self-employment to business ownership, that's a huge chasm in this particular industry. And that's like a passion piece for us. That was a very clear path, I think. I shouldn't say a very clear path. It was a very clear conviction that we need to take that path. When I invested and came on board at the Paris painting ecosystem, and that's been just a fun journey and a passion point for us to help others take that path. And the further you get down that, it's like, being a business owner is great. There's lots of benefits, positivity, impact, influence. But then that pathway of how do I unwind out of this, and how do I make it even less dependent on my leadership and my capacity to influence, and move into that, how do I make money with money, and how do I influence through just being an investor in others. So
so those two books, I think, huge. We talk about those a lot. Any like relationships, seeing examples? I think again, there's an element of seeing examples of what's possible, like out in the wild, so to speak, and seeing it's like, wow, that could happen. Anything like that come to mind for you?
Relationships and examples?
Yeah.
Set out for me a little.
Yeah, just like maybe one that comes to mind just because I know you. Like your uncle was a successful business guy. There was some exposure there. I think maybe even two in, right out of school, you ventured off into that real estate endeavor a little bit and were able to rub shoulders with some folks. And anything that was impactful about maybe some of those relationships, people that you saw to just inspire like what could be.
For sure, man. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have some family members that have gone out and built businesses and have played into the, private equity, venture capital world. So some loose exposure to that, I would just say, growing up, perked the interest and understanding that there can be more to the life and to the markets. Right out of school, I'll just say the kind of that core gentleman group that I partnered with and worked with, man, lots of wonderful experience. And most of them came out of technology backgrounds, engineering and technology backgrounds. So yes, it was real estate, but most of them were actually really deeply tied into private equity. They've all been a part of funds. They've taken companies public in their past. And so I would just say kind of an odd, in the grand scheme of things, kind of an odd thing to come around for a group of guys like that. They wanted to open up shared office environments, and I happen to be a young guy that was said, sure, stock options sound cool. Let's go for it, right? But absolutely the backgrounds and the way that I think the way that they were inherently thinking about everything that they do in life through a shareholder mentality and a lens. It wasn't about income generation for them. It was about equity growth. It was about team building. That was, in hindsight, probably a very imprinting experience in my world. That whether I acknowledge it or know it all the time, there's probably a lot of things that are in the subconscious there. Of the way that the Jeff Odells or the Rick Shans, those would be a couple key figures in my world. I would also say there's a gentleman in town that I not like a big name dropper, but came from a huge family in the real estate space as well and the construction space, and just took me under his wing a little bit for a season and really pulled back the curtain. Yeah, construction is great. Running these businesses are great. What's also really cool is when you can leverage them into real estate. And that I would just say the teeter-tottering of there are cycles that are going to go on in the economy. And sometimes it's great to be invested in real estate and you just keep plowing forward and developing. And then it's kind of works in the inverse, right? I'll just say, even for our experience, well, maybe before I get into that really actually is the reason why I jumped in and got back into the trades. Is the light bulb started clicking for me of, if you want to grow wealth in America, really probably anywhere in the world, small business equity and real estate are two wonderful vehicles to pursue. That doesn't mean that you can't get wealthy in the stock market or time out crypto or whatever it is. I don't do that personally. I know people that do, and I have a cousin that does, and it's like, gosh dang it, how do you do that? That sounds a lot easier than what I'm doing. But no, the tried and true path is small business equity in real estate. If you want to get in real estate, it happens to be really, really valuable to be involved in small businesses that are involved in construction and real estate management. So that was really the genesis and the thesis of getting back into the trades. Is I was in the real estate world. We were building buildings, and I kept meeting people that were in kind of the construction. And as the curtains pulled back a little bit more, you realize, holy cow, there's a lot of equity options and opportunities in real estate if you can control the construction and the building of them. And that was a big light bulb moment for sure. Yeah. And I think coming back to what started with painting and the trades was, you got to start with what you know in these, and how do you build equity in a small business. But for me, it was always leveraging the small business equity in the painting, the residential businesses, and how can we leverage the people, the capital, and the know-how to get further and further into real estate. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. You've mentioned a couple of times the kind of the shareholder mentality and thinking like a shareholder. And I think I would say that's another thing that we really focus on here at Aleph, but obviously it's not just an Aleph thing. Anybody who owns a business is a shareholder. But maybe just to go right at that, like, whenever we say shareholder mindset, what do we mean? What are we kind of talking about? And I think particularly, how can you be a shareholder of a painting company? Or sometimes the share, it's like, like stock market. Maybe people think of that as like a stock market term. But what do we mean by shareholder mindset?
Yeah, good question. And I would say at its most fundamental root is, if my time, energy, and influence is not involved in the company, how are my shares? How is the company doing? And so when I think about the shareholder mindset, we're pretty rigid here in Aleph of your time and your energy equals your compensation. And what we often see when we invest in a bunch of these businesses, small businesses, what's often the case is people blur those lines a lot. of what is the business making versus what am I making as maybe the business owner who's active in the company. And that needs to be very distinct buckets. And I think that's maybe not the clearest definition for it. I would just say ultimately the shareholder mindset is how's my share value going on these, but it's really, really hard to even come to that. Is the shares getting more valuable or not until I can probably drive a wedge between how much should I be paying myself for my time and energy, my leadership in this, and as maybe a business owner, as a CEO or a VP of sales, and then what's left for the shareholders, even if it's just me. And for a lot of small business owners, it is just them as a shareholder, and that forced acknowledgement of that these profits might not be profits, that might be compensation for a management team. If I were not doing this today, that's probably if I were to cut to the chase in this industry, that's probably one of the hardest moves initially for people is to delineate those two realities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Because I think, and this is somewhat of the EMyth. I think with the EMyth, what that helps is this distinction of, in the business, on the business, and it kind of it takes these two realities and gives us two concrete things to think about. And I think this is a similar outworking of that, right? Of there's, what is my company making in total, and then separate from what is my energy and effort as an employee making in the business. Is that right?
Yeah. And then how stable is that with or without my personal time, energy, and effort too? And I would just say when it's small business, the truth of the matter is those are super blurred, right? If you get hit by the turkey truck, and this would be kind of the turkey truck test. If I die today, how long will this thing keep going? And how much money would it keep making, right? That would be kind of the true test, the shareholder mentality of being able to answer that question for the next generations, for your family, for your partners, whatever it may be. What is the stability of this business outside of my own active time and energy? I know we're kind of saying the same thing. They're going around it, but I think that foundation for us here, it drives a lot more. We talk a little bit about the goose and the golden egg. It drives a lot of those decisions of right now. We certainly could probably make more profit to the bottom line every single year, right? Everybody needs to make these decisions. We could certainly drive more profit, or we could drive more equity. And the hard part for most people is they don't understand enough about the financials or have a clear enough vision of their shares and their equity to make educated decisions or make really informed, clear decisions of, hey, if we don't hire this PM, if we don't invest in this software and this tool, if we don't take on that marketing and open up that market, we could make. I mean, for us, those decisions often are measured in six-figure plus. We could make more this year, but what would that do to next year's share value, right? And we don't have that. And those are some of the foundational decision metrics that I think are quite different than somebody who still is self-employed, is thinking about their business simply in the terms of, man, I want to try to get another $500,000 of revenue to make another $60,000, $70,000 a year, right, in my pocket, without that clear understanding of what is that costing me right now. If I do that, I might get the benefit of the profits, but if I don't hire another person and train them and develop, I suppose, more of the ecosystem here, the stability of the ecosystem, that's really, really damaging to your shares.
So on that point, I think there's an element of, so if I were to maybe play devil's advocate or push, it's like, man, the money I could put in my pocket this year, that's like tangible right here, right now. I can see why I can understand very easily why I should care about that.
Yep.
The value of my company, the value of my shares next year, that's kind of like, that feels maybe out there. Like, why should I care about that today? Like what? Yeah.
Well, I would just say, whenever we say things like, why should you care about that? I always like to start by saying it's not always right or wrong, good or bad. So words like should is, everybody can have their own determination of why are you in this? Why are you doing the business for yourself? And
Yeah, that's
if
good.
the goal is to be self-employed and just to make an easier income rather than get into corporate America, I don't want to work for somebody else. If you want to simply just achieve the goal of, hey, I'm just trying to make money and fill, a retirement account, and I don't want to have to be bossed around by somebody else. Yeah, that is not necessarily a shareholder mentality, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I always start by saying that's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just different. And if that's the objective, I would just say, yeah, we certainly meet people where it's like, holy smokes, man, the amount of work that it would take to move your cash cow right now, which is working out really good for you, and move that in. Like, as a shareholder, it's not good for me. I can't invest in that business because it's too dependent on you. That's not the answer. Is not always, yeah. Let's go through all the pain of unwinding you out of this business because it might be just right for that person. That's a cash cow, and you're going to diversify, and you're going to get into your whatever it is, move that into IRA accounts or start investing in real estate with those. So I would just start by saying, without a vision of, hey, I want this business to last for decades, if not generations, that has to be probably a pretty core foundation of a shareholder mentality. Or for some people, it's like, I want to be able to sell this business and flip it. That would be, for some sake, that's a shareholder mentality too. So if your destination is probably one of those two of, hey, I want to build this to sell, or I want to build this to hold long term, that would require the shareholder mentality. If it is, I want to just be as free with my time and energy, and I don't want any other people bossing me around, that there's nothing wrong with that. I would just start by, and not start by, reiterate.
Yeah.
But it's the clarity of those. And that, I think for us, that always gets down to the vision and values of when we work with people and we're partnering with people, it's first and foremost, let's get alignment on that foundation, that reality. Are you here to make as much income that you can with the least amount of pain in your day to day? That is cool. Absolutely. It's just not our vision. It's not our values. For us, it's, I want to build an asset, something that can last for hopefully generations. And that's a whole different mentality for people.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. Let's talk about like the role of the visionary a little bit. So this is something that is kind of interesting in the trades where, we kind of talk about, there's not, one of the things we love about the painting industry is these are not overly complicated businesses. They're pretty simple. Even the roles, right? Sales, we kind of refer to this as our core three: sales, project management, coordination. The training and coaching of those folks is hard work, but it's straightforward in some degree. So kind of how a visionary sits into that. I'm curious, one of the things that you kind of say is the main role of the visionary is to increase shareholder value. And I'm just curious, maybe if you reflect a little bit, how has that shifted over time, right? Like being the visionary of Paris Painting when it was $2 million versus being a visionary over Aleph, which, over 35 million of kind of revenue across everything we have going on. How is that your kind of role of a visionary shifted over time?
Good question, man. I think like most small businesses, they don't nobody has the luxury of just being a visionary. And you certainly are sitting more and more in that fractional and a very minority portion of your time in the beginning. And it is kind of still all hands on deck when your business is that 2 million. And I was still running the finances right back in the day. I was still selling. I was still solving client issues when we just merged up and I came into Paris Painting, and it was young and fun for sure. But I think there is a component where back in those days and even today, I would just say the more and more, maybe I'll just start by saying I think the right balance is about 2/3 outward looking and 1/3 inward looking. And what I mean by that is you've got your head up and out and looking for either new deals, looking for new revenue streams, looking for new partnerships to be pursuing, and looking for new talent. So you're kind of always looking for who and what is next in the next 18 months to 3 years, and obviously still guiding into a longer term picture as well, but still spending about a third of your time on the what. What are we doing today, and what's driving profit today? And that paired with an integrator who can spend about a third of their time looking up with you and kind of course correcting vision and maybe pacing, slowing down and bringing some reality to it, but spending 2/3 of their time working on driving the P&L. That's a nice mix. It's a nice blend if you can get there. And that, for us, it takes volume for sure for me to be able to spend that much time not looking in. And it's not even like I'm in the businesses, but I'm not even working on the business. I'm looking out to what might be possible for next. So yeah, for me, what that has meant along the journey is in the early years, it's mostly about how are we going to make those next revenue leaps? Who's do we need to recruit in? How do I need to convince somebody to leave a great corporate job and come to a painting company, right? What's in it for them? What's the story and what's the vision that we need to cast for them and the role we need to curate and create? That's a big portion of it. It's working on those key accounts as well early on of the GCs of the world, the account development of it, what are the big whales? I think that's still your time in the early days. And then I would just say for us, when it's in the painting industry, I would just say when you're into that 5 million plus range in the painting, it becomes a little bit more of a diversified approach in my experience, where now there's a management team that is pretty good, and right, they're in theory, right, they're outpacing your own ability to add value into those key accounts, and for me, that transition began more and more. How are we going to start looking out and diversifying? So, what other companies could we either leverage this ecosystem in, or for us, real estate development as well? And that isn't necessarily going to impact. It could, frankly, it could hurt our P&L this year, but it is in the best interest of driving share value long term, and that becomes more and more of your time and energy. And I would just say for me, what that has looked like is the real estate development side of our business. All right, right. That has not been the most conducive to painting houses. I would just tell you that, right? But it has been very positive for the shareholder value of the shareholders of Aleph. The ability for us to go out and make these minority investment deals or majority investment deals in these, that doesn't necessarily help Paris Painting's growth by any means, but it's a diversification and it's a big path for us as we think about our shareholder growth.
Yeah. I'm curious, just when you look at the painting industry, it's kind of funny too, thinking back, you kind of gave the anecdote of some of the mindset when you were at College Pro, kind of, thank God we're in business school and we're going to go, into the big world economy, and we can leave this behind. And now this is back where you are. What are some of the things that have you, maybe over the next 5 years, some of the things that have you excited about what's going on in our industry? Some of the opportunity that you see just in that kind of visionary seed of like, how you're thinking about increasing value.
Yeah.
What has you excited about the next 5 years in our industry?
Man, I think one of the bigger excitements right now is the amount of new blood that's coming into the industry, and I think the amount of innovation that that creates. I think back in 2017, when I first kind of got back fully immersed in the industry and going to the events of the PCAs of the world, it's amazing to see how different a PCA event is today. And that's just, it's a nice reflection of the industry and how far it's come in the last 6 years or so. So I can only imagine how far that needle may push. I certainly, right, people talk about the stigma of painting is not where people want to be and it's hard to recruit and retain people in this. I would just say I think there's enough stories out there right now of successful entrepreneurs coming into the industry. It's not necessarily gone, right? But I don't know that people think about the trades of as much of the drunk uncles and the truck and the trucks as they do now. It certainly is not because of us. It's the whole collective of a lot of people coming back to the trades. So that's exciting for me. I would say what's exciting for me as well is the opportunistic landscape that there is for what I would just say is non-large private equity syndications to come in and truly find niches in this area. Unlike, I would just say, some of the other trades, even the residential trades of most of them, the licensed trades of HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, there's a lot of private equity money that's come into that for the last decade. And
for sure.
The landscape of that has certainly changed from a consolidation. It's not to say that there's not opportunity there. There is. But I would just say our industries, and I would loosely define that as the lowly regulated or unlicensed trades, is still a wild west out there. And there's an amazing amount of opportunity for people to come in and consolidate market share. And the thing that excites me is the amount of talent that is coming to this industry right now. That always gets me perked up. So it's fun. I just was reading an article of another company that just left the Y Combinator and raised $4 million to ultimately kind of start a painting company. And that's, you see those things and it's like, wow, that's pretty awesome, man. You don't hear very many stories about people doing that in the painting industry these days. And to me, those just are tells of what's coming. And sometimes people get spooked out by that, right? Market consolidation may be coming. There's more money that's going to get interested and invested in this. From my seat, I think that speaks to more and more opportunity for us and what we can offer to the market than it does the fear factor.
Yeah. I guess maybe given that potential, some of what might be coming or how the industry might, shift, or some of the things that are happening, if you're talking to somebody who owns a painting company, maybe they've established a brand. I don't know, what would be your encouragement to business owners given where the market might be going, where the landscape might be shifting to? What would be some things to kind of consider of how to run your business, how to look at your business, that maybe it wasn't as pertinent to them 10 years ago. It's like, given some of the trends, you might want to think about this a little bit more directly now. Does anything like that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there will certainly be more vying for attention in the next 10 years. There'll be bigger marketing budgets. I think there will be more and more companies that are professional that you'd be bidding against. And I think even we make investments around the nation right now. And some of the really fun ones are these brands that have been around for decades that really work off word of mouth.
Sure.
I don't know that that's necessarily going away, but leveraging that brand right now and grabbing market share. And I would just say one reality for us, we often talk about that $5 million is kind of the entry of building an asset out of your business. I would just say there still is a runway in this market right now. And I'm not a fortune teller, right? But
Sure.
right now, that runway to become a business, like a turn your business into an asset type of tagline that we often use, it's clear. And there is not too many voices. There's not too much consolidation of the market. In 10 years from now, that runway may be more crowded. And I think there will be more people like ourselves. We're not the only ones, certainly, that are getting more sophisticated when it comes to marketing in each one of these markets that we're in. We won't be the only ones there, right? And what that ultimately will keep doing is pushing more and more pressure on the downward section of the market of, hey, it's not like I'm just kind of searching around for a referral because I've already seen 3 to 5 companies in this market that have actively marketed to me because this industry is getting further and further into sophistication. So that cost of acquisition, taking market share right now, I would really, really encourage people. It's not easy. I don't think it's going to get easier 10 years from now. And maybe that's what you're asking, I would strongly recommend leaning in right now and scaling your business, figuring out what it takes to get beyond 5 million. In today's dollars, that's a good goal to have for a painting company. And it's a great place where you can start to stabilize and build a management team that can be incentivized through market wages. If you're not there 10 years from now, right, the ability to get there, I don't think is going to get easier year over year.
Yeah. Yeah. Market share is incredibly important. It's going to be harder and harder to gain market share as the sophistication goes up.
And I think you see that in a couple markets, but not very many across the nation, right? Oaken, you spend your days traveling the nation and going and looking at these markets, and it seems like there's a couple hotbeds where mostly, right, that I would just say like the Denver feels like more of America might start looking like Denver, painting industry. And there's, I can't imagine a lot of trucking to trucks survive in Denver right now, given how many larger painting companies there are running out of there.
Totally. Yep. I've absolutely seen that. And it does feel similar to, right, like HVAC, et cetera. It's kind of like, having a sophisticated marketing presence, really good branding, really easy to use website, wrapped vehicles, all those things that maybe 10, 20 years ago was looked at as somewhat of a novelty. It's kind of like, that's like table stakes now when HVAC. If somebody doesn't have that, I'm really asking questions as a consumer. And I think, you're seeing more and more of that, like in those markets, the Denvers, I think Austin is another one that we've seen, Dallas, like there's some of these that, the competition is definitely ramping up and just the professionalism. So, yeah.
And the macro trends that are here, right? The do it for me generations that are coming behind the boomer generations. The further we get into that, it is not like I want somebody to come in the rusty van and like feel like I know them. It is more and more towards, I want a hospitality experience here. I don't want to feel uncomfortable by who's in my home or the presence that you have. I want to feel like, hey, that was a really enjoyable experience. That it was beyond just a service, and that's something that we talk about quite a bit here. The market certainly benefits, and you will find benefit for creating experiences for the consumer right now. But I think 10 years from now, it's like you're saying, if you can't create and curate experiences for them, that's ultimately what's going to be winning, because people will know the brands that they're going to be wanting to work with more than they do today. And again, not a fortune teller, so I can't say how fast does that happen. But if we look at some of those other industries, and I would just say those kind of the core 3 of the licensed trades in America, that certainly has happened in the last 20 years.
No, it's good. That's good. Well, listen, man, I appreciate the time today, and good thoughts. Appreciate the work that you do here, the leadership that you provide. We'll have to have you on again sometime if you're up for it.
Game on, man. Keep on cooking.
Cool.